you got hairy legs, I got hairy legs, but they're really nice, soft hairs.
Stop it now.
Really
Stop
nice.
it now.
Sorry.
Easy now.
Oh.
Let's start the podcast. The cameras were rolling.
Sorry about that.
Hey guys, and welcome back to the Drive Talk podcast, and welcome back to Podium Place. We haven't been here for ages.
We haven't. It's lovely to be down here. It's the weather's lovely outside. We're drinking their wonderful coffee, and there's lots of stuff going on in the showroom, which is part of the cafe here.
Yeah.
There's cars like the
Valkyrie Spider,
which I walked straight past, partly because it's about as low as this table. I couldn't believe it. It's sitting there and them crazy Sims behind us.
Yeah, no, some really cool stuff. So we're in the roastery again, which is a really great venue actually because it's nice and cool. We have turned the aircon up a little bit because it was freezing when we walked in here this morning.
Especially if you're wearing shorts.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, I went brave because, this is probably the only summer we're going to get, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, we haven't been back here for ages. So big thanks to the guys at Podium Place for hosting us. And while we're doing thanks as well, big thanks to Michelin, our title sponsor. We've done some great things with them recently. I was with them last week at Myra doing some tyre testing, actually, which is really cool. Video coming to my channel soon. But yeah, big thanks to them. But I guess we were going to have a chat today because the last time we were together was at Festival of Speed.
Yes.
And we were together on the Thursday when we recorded the podcast. And then Friday, we were both there, but doing different things. The only time we saw each other was when I drove past in a Maserati MC20 and spotted you at the Porsche hospitality.
Right at the end of the day, wasn't
right
it?
at the end of the day, I was like, Joe! So we thought we'd have a chat because one of the things that we both noticed at Festival of Speed, and I don't know if those of you watching, if you went, if you did, put it in the comments. And while you're there, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you give us a follow because that really does help the growth of the channel. But there were some brands there I'd never heard of.
Yes, lots of brands I'd never heard of, and not just tucked away at the back. They were pretty prominent at the front. Clearly had a lot of money.
Yeah, and a lot of those brands that I'd never heard of were Chinese.
Yeah. I mean, we can't start with MG in the sense that we all have heard of MG, and we talked about them not so long ago on the pod. But I mean, I guess them being the central feature brand kind of kicked off a theme, in my opinion, at Festival of Speed, in the sense that there was a lot of Chinese brands there. Some I'd heard of, others, the majority I just hadn't heard of.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've said it a couple of times on the channel over the last maybe 6 to 12 months that there are a whole bunch of Chinese brands operating in China making cars that no one's ever heard of. And it turns out most of them came to Goodwood.
Yep.
and I kind of I get it completely. China is a huge market, and there's been a huge amount of research into electric powertrains in particular in China. And arguably, there are Chinese companies leading the way in battery development and software development and motor development. So the cars that they're making, actually, there's some really interesting stuff coming out of China. And we thought we'd explore it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your favourite subject?
Electric cars.
Well, and they also clearly have a lot of money to spend because not only did they have quite big presence at Goodwood, they were spending a lot of money trying to kind of get their name out and publicising it as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's an open market in that sense, isn't it? And fair play to the Chinese for producing these cars that are supposedly very good for the money in such short space of time. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid a long time ago, everything we owned, toys, gadgets, electrical, all made in China, wasn't it?
Made in China or made in Taiwan.
Exactly. So it was all, it's not like it's a new thing in terms of China dominating. But I think something we're probably going to get onto is just talking about the fact that for me, it's quite scary because I can see them taking over very quickly, like literally in front of our eyes, the likes of, Audi and various other brands disappearing at somewhere like Festival of Speed, and suddenly these guys taking over. And I think that's kind of what is happening in the real world as well. I mean, the pricing alone, it's all about price now, isn't it? It's all about, we're all in a recession, interest rates are high. And I think, and this is me taking my EV hat off, but an EV car, you've got less, at least for me, less emotions around owning an EV car, right? Mm-hmm. So what are you looking for? You're looking for things like range, you're looking for cost, you're looking for the infotainment system, normal things in a car, but range and cost are two of them. So if you've got a Chinese brand that can give you that at half the price of, let's say, a Volkswagen,
Yeah.
where are you going?
Yeah. And so we thought we'd. So I don't know about you, but on my channel, whenever I review an electric car, there's a very kind of polarized view coming out of the comment section, right?
Yep. And that's changed a lot, hasn't it, in the last few years as well?
Yeah. And so, a lot of people saying, oh, the manufacturers are forcing us into EV and, forcing us down this way. It's a big lie and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. So I thought it would be worth maybe just having a discussion about why it is the landscape's changing in the favour of EVs and just what the numbers mean and what the manufacturers are faced with. Because my view is, I think if things don't change a little bit, or quite a lot actually going forward, I think there's going to be a big victim of this move to EV in the manufacturer going bust. And it could be quite a significant big one.
Yep.
So I thought, a lot of people hear the EV mandate, 2030, we're not allowed to sell new petrol or diesel cars. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. It doesn't help the fact that the UK government pushed that date back to 2030. Although, interestingly, the incoming Labour government in the UK have said that they're going to restore it back to 2030. So I've done some research.
Oh,
you're such a you're a fan of that, aren't you?
No, I am. Glad one of us.
I haven't got my laptop out. I've gone for the screen.
Oh, okay.
So the first things first is this is EU and UK policy that's been developed by politicians, not by the car industry. I'm sure there was some negotiations and discussions with the car industry, and it's been driven around the environmental pressures and so on about the damage that petrol cars and diesel cars does to the environment. There's a whole other debate about what damage EVs do to the environment or not. We could maybe touch on that as well.
Yeah.
So the move towards EV only by 2030 is a gradual move where the percentage of cars that a manufacturer makes that are battery only, so excluding petrol and diesel, increases year on year between now and 2030. So we're in 2024, and at the moment, a manufacturer, of the cars that they sell, 22% of those cars must be battery electric cars. Okay, any car made that isn't that, outside of that allowance, so let's say, what I'm doing my bad maths here, 78% of cars can be petrol. Right?
Yep.
So let's say they make
diesel.
Or diesel. Let's say they make more than 78%. For every car over that limit, they have to pay a fine of £15,000.
Yep.
Okay, which is a lot.
Yep.
Okay. Next year, that 22% increases to 25%. In 2026, it goes to 33%. 27, it goes to 38%. Then the jump from 2027 to 2028, it goes up to 52%.
So what's that, 14%? No more? Something like that?
Yeah. Oh, as a jump. Yeah. 2029, it's 66%. So 2/3 of the vehicles that are sold must be battery electric.
Yep.
2030, it's 80%. And then by 2035, it's 100%.
Yep.
Okay. And you think, wow, okay. And then what you'll then often get is people will say, well, there's been this huge growth in electric vehicle sales.
Yep.
And actually this year we hit a million electric vehicles on the road in the UK. Now these are UK numbers, but if you look at the EU mandate, they're the same.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not just an EU thing.
It's all
not just a UK thing, it's in the EU. Scary number here from the SMMT, which is the UK's Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, I think is the SMMT. So in January this year, they released a note. So of all of the EVs that have been sold so far in the UK, okay, only 1 in 11 of them have been bought by private buyers.
Yeah.
1 in 11.
Yep.
All the others have been bought by leasing companies or company car buyers because of the massive benefits of taxation and stuff you get.
I mean, that doesn't actually surprise me at all. I think to myself, who is that one?
I know, right?
No, but I say, there is.
So, and the challenge they've got, I think, to hit these numbers
Yep.
is the private car buyer. What they want is a car that's affordable.
Yep.
And I think it's the Dacia Spring is just about to be the cheapest car in the UK, and that's going to be a BEV platform, isn't it?
Okay.
But there's still, a cheap electric car. You're lucky to kind of break the 30 grand mark. Some of the MGs are like late 20s, early 30s.
Yep.
You're a big BMW. What's the cheapest electric car BMW, mate?
I wouldn't even know. Like an i4 35?
35, 40 grand?
Yeah, at least. Yeah, probably 40 grand.
And then, your Teslas are like in the 35s and 40s. You can quite easily hit 50, 60, 70,000 pounds.
Yep.
So if you're a private buyer, how many private buyers are going to spend 50,000 pounds on a car?
On a car that they know now, we all know is going to depreciate. You can't even use depreciate like a stone, depreciate like a cobalt.
Yeah.
They are just, the resale values are horrifying. And I know most people do finance the cars, but then finance companies have obviously also cottoned onto that. So your residual value, I forget what it's called, the guaranteed
future value. Yeah.
Guaranteed future value at the end. That obviously, to protect, and you can see why, if I was a finance company, I would underestimate that value. So yeah, that's tiny. So you're paying off a massive amount. Insurance on EVs are expensive. So it's, like you said, as a private buyer, I think that benefit, unless you're a company car owner, is just zero really. And it's really hard to justify. And I bet you most of that, whatever it is, not even 10%, is it about 9%, 1 in 11? Most of those people are probably very well off, affluent families who have got a big house and a couple of garages and a charging port, and they've got their Range Rover Sport and they've got their 911 and they've also got a Tesla or something that they use to do the shops and whatever. I bet you that's 50% of that small portion of people.
Well, there's a whole, I guess there's even another subject to do with ownership of an EV. If you don't have somewhere to park it and charge it yourself, it becomes a whole different proposition.
Yep.
But let's get back to the Chinese thing. So if you were to look at something like BYD, I'm just going to pick a Chinese brand that I've done I've reviewed the BYD Seal.
Yep.
Really, really good car. In the UK, I think the Seal is in the region of £45,000.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's a good size family car, full of tech, really nicely built, really good car. In China, the equivalent car is about £25,000 equivalent.
Wow.
So the EVs in China from these brands are significantly cheaper than they are here in the UK. So it's quite possible and I was reading, and this is the bit I kind of teased you and said I'll tell you about this while we're on the podcast. I read a really interesting article from Forbes. So it's a decent source.
Yep.
So the Chinese manufacturers could flood the market. They're already doing that with marketing. Flood the market with cars, bring the prices down of cars. And the challenge with the European car manufacturers is to say, that's going to absolutely knacker their business model. So what we'll do is we'll put some import tariffs on Chinese cars so that they aren't able to do that.
Right.
Okay. The problem with that is the German manufacturers, your BMWs, your Mercedes, your VWs, wouldn't want that to happen, because if you put import taxes on Chinese cars coming into the EU, then the Chinese are just going to reciprocate and put taxes going into China. And guess where BMW, Mercedes, VW make all their money? China, right?
Yeah.
So it's
a catch-22.
Actually a really, really complex space. And the challenge I can see coming forward is, I think lots of private buyers, if they have that 1 in 11 person, has had their fingers burnt. I know plenty of people who've bought Taycans or whatever through salary sacrifice schemes or whatever, and just basically just given the car back at the end of the lease because it's just shedded value.
Yep.
And they won't do it again.
Yep.
And I just think we're at this tipping point where the all EV mandate needs to be reconsidered. The new Labour government in the UK has said that they'll look at bringing it back to 2030, whereas actually in the EU they're realising that this needs to change. Otherwise, a big manufacturer is going to go pop.
Yep.
And there's talk of them giving more free rein to hybrids, so basically not having hybrids within that number.
Yep.
And Toyota have already said that they have EVs clearly, but their main focus is hybrid technology.
Yep.
What about hydrogen technology, whether that's fuel cell or combustion? What about sustainable fuels? There just needs to be a bigger argument. But at the moment, when you walk around Festival of Speed, and you see that I can just see a storm coming, and it scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, it scares the hell out of me as well, and not in a. Yeah.
And that's not because you hate EVs. That's
it's
just
not.
Because...
It's not that. And there's so many things that have happened in the last couple of years where I just sit back and I'm like, yep, I could see that happening, or I told you so, or I knew that was going to happen, and it's just getting a bit out of control now. And I think you brought up those figures. Talking about the percentage of cars, and I think this is something that really needs to be made clear, because we talked about it a bit at the Festival of Speed with the M5 going to becoming a hybrid and very heavy, and all these new EVs that manufacturers like the Germans are having to produce. They have to produce these cars, so you can love or hate EVs, but they have to do what they're being told to do by governments and legislation. So
I had someone say to me, why don't they just pay the fine? The fines are massive.
Yeah.
£15,000 per car over whatever the threshold is.
Yep.
Is just not a sustainable amount of money.
It's not. And I think the problem we have now, and again, German manufacturers in particular have, is whether this gets pushed back to 2035 or 2040, or if it gets brought forward again to 2030, regardless of whatever happens to that, they are still under the same rules. Like that percentage hasn't changed. So when they say, we pushed it back to 2035 a couple of years ago, and there's talk of pushing it, that percentage is still the same. So so basically we sit back and go, well, that's great. I don't need to buy an EV for another 10 years or whatever. But that's not what the German manufacturers have to do. No. They have to go, well, that's not good, because now the public are being told that they're not being forced into them overnight like they were before, but we need to sell more every year. Yeah. And so their hands are tied. And what's happening, I think we talked about it and touched upon it a little bit when we had Tony Lewis on the podcast, was it back end of last year, is they're, at dealership levels, for instance, whether it's the Hendy groups or BMW groups, whatever, they have to sell a certain amount of EVs and cars. And if their customers don't want them, they're really stuck, because they have to get rid of these cars, because otherwise that's what the manufacturer stipulates.
And what you're finding, and Tony mentioned it about, I think he was talking about the 3 Series Touring 325, wasn't he? They're just taking them off. You can't order them.
Yes.
And Ford are doing that. So it's a nice segue into talking about Ford's latest electric car. But Ford are doing that. They're basically, they're bringing some cars off of production.
Yep.
They've ended the production of the Ford Fiesta.
Yep.
Okay. Because one of the things you could argue is, if you look at the EVs that are available, I just think that
big and heavy.
They're big and heavy and SUV size, and all the manufacturers are missing a trick.
Yeah.
But you want a smallish, affordable family car. You don't need a big 5-seat SUV, 2.5-ton monolith.
No, some of the smaller ones that you've been to see and tested recently, I really like the Alpine or the Renault 5, and I do love that idea as an electric car. The original Mini Electric, apart from its atrocious range,
the new one's better.
I'm sure, and I hope it is. But I think those smaller electric cars, because again, with my cynical old head on, I just sit back and I think, well, look at Lotus, for instance. Lotus have always built super lightweight little sports cars. Now they're EVs, because again, they're being forced into it. They're big 3-ton, huge family cars. And that's kind of the same across everything. It's like Ford are no longer making the Fiesta, which was a really frugal, little, lightweight, brilliant car that was good in the city, was great and happy on the motorway. It was super efficient. You see Fiestas that are 20 years old on the road all the time because they're built well. That is a car that leaves a small footprint on the planet and does such a great job. Now we're being, we've got the crappy being forced down our throats.
Joe, we'll talk about them. I mean, we'll talk about that in a second. I mean, I literally last week drove the new Kia Picanto.
Yep.
So it's got a little 1 litre 3-cylinder engine. It's got a 5-speed manual gearbox.
Brilliant.
It weighs next to nothing, and it's 15.5 grand. Right,
Brilliant.
Or from the base spec one.
Yep.
And the video went up this week, and the amount of people who just said, "That's the kind of car we should be making."
Yep.
You know,
the city should be full of them.
and it does, 65, 70 miles to the gallon.
And it fits in parking spaces.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's so many positives to that little car. Yeah, I mean, that's it. But yet that little car is probably being slowly, I don't know what, Kia will have to get rid of it if it continues like we are.
Oh, yeah,
It'll be gone in a few years.
Yeah. I mean, Kia have they've got their BEV fleet is pretty strong, right? EV3, EV6, EV9.
Yep.
They're as good at electric cars as you can get,
Yep.
in my opinion. But let's talk about Ford, shall we? So, because I want to just find out what your response is to this car. But I think I know already. But I'd love to know, if you're listening, put it in the comments what you think.
Yeah.
So Ford they've got rid of the Fiesta, which was one of their best-selling cars, brilliant little thing. And they announced that they were bringing back the iconic name, the Capri.
Yep.
Right. Now, I am old enough to remember Capris when they were cool.
Yep.
Right?
It's a long time ago.
It was quite a long time ago. They'd
Now I
made
do
the
as
Capri
well.
for a while.
Yeah.
And they did bring back, remember the Ford Probe? Remember that for a while?
Yes. Yeah, that was a bit of a flop. Yeah.
Oh, that was.
Yeah.
But the Ford Capri, cool coupe style, long bonnet, twin lights at the front, rear-wheel drive,
2.8.
2.8.
Was it a V6? Yeah.
Mega, right? So they're bringing back the Capri.
Yep.
So I'm thinking, this is going to be cool. Someone's going to make a coupe style EV.
Yep.
Brilliant. Something went wrong.
Yes. I don't know what you could describe that as. It's like half Polestar. I mean, that's giving it too much credit because I think Polestar styling is brilliant.
Yeah.
But just the whole, it's just...
So it's like a SUV stance. It's got a bit of coupe to it.
Yeah.
When you look at its side profile. But for me, Ford's EV, going back to these numbers we just talked about. Right?
Yeah.
So you go into a Ford dealership, this year, 22% of the cars they sell have to be EV. And the only choice you've got is the Mustang Mach-E, which people hate because it was a name that was associated with V8 muscle cars.
Yeah.
I've ran a Mach-E as a long term. They're not bad, but they're not selling like they should do.
No.
You've got the Ford Explorer, which has an all EV option, and you've got the Lightning pickup truck as well, which But and then you've now got the Capri.
Yep.
Where's the affordable family little runaround thing? Why don't they make an electric Fiesta that goes up toe to toe with something like a Renault 5?
But also, where's the where's the here and now for people that aren't ready to move into EV? They've got nothing. They've almost.
They're still doing PHEVs or hybrids in, I think,
Fiesta,
Cougar
and in Focus.
Cougar and Focus.
Okay.
Focus might be on its way out.
Yeah, well, it must be. It must be towards the end of its life.
And you're like, really? And then they kind of, the next thing they're saying they're in trouble. And this is Ford Motor Company.
But I mean, Ford. Think, you go back to the Capri, right? Of all the brands in the last, let's say, 5 years that have destroyed an iconic name and hopefully learned the lesson, it's Ford. We just talked about it, the Mustang.
Yeah.
They should have learned a lesson from there. There is no excuses. You have upset current Ford owners. You've made laughing stock of the Ford brand by calling that electric fridge on wheels a Mustang, right? And as you say, listen, all electric, you get in most electric cars, and they do drive well. They do what they're meant to, apart from the range and all the rest of it. They all drive. They're all much of a muchness, in my opinion. They all do what they're sort of meant to do. And I've not driven a really bad one, to be fair. Yes, I did just say that.
You feeling all right, mate?
I think I might have a temperature.
Pat, call an ambulance. Joe's having an episode.
It's sitting next to you with your legs out.
I know.
But
sorry about my legs, by the way, people.
But you think they would have you think someone would have looked at a tiny bit of feedback and gone, oh, the whole world thinks that was a bad idea. What should we do next? I know. What else have we got? Well, we've used the Mustang. Let's bring the Capri forward. And I mean, I'm not a football guy, so I don't get it. But the whole I mean, I can't believe Cantona must be short for a few quid because it's just embarrassing. I mean, I don't.
If you're going to destroy a name, they could have brought back Scorpio because they were terrible the first time round.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, something like that. But I mean, it was painful watching it all at Goodwood, and just watching how hard they pushed it and continue to push it. And
all I would say is I haven't driven it, so I'm just going on its aesthetics, which I'm not a fan of, and maybe I need to get my hands on one and do a video on one, and then formulate.
What sort of price is it? Do we know?
It'd be about £1 billion probably.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm assuming sort of mid 40s or mid 40s to mid 50s.
But again, I think a bit like, and this is where there's going to be a big problem when everything does move eventually to EV fully. And if brands, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if brands like Ford and like Volkswagen are still around in 5 years' time, this is where their problem's going to be. It's going to be, and I think there is a separation, and there will always be a little bit more premium in brands like, and I'm not just saying it as a fanboy, BMW, Mercedes, maybe, I don't know. I think they're burying their own grave pretty quickly because they're awful, their new cars. But Mercedes and Audi, I think they're always going to have that slight premium edge and therefore be able to charge more, and people want to still be seen in a BMW, for instance, regardless of whether it's an electric car or not. Ford and Volkswagen, both, as we know, brilliant brands over the years. They produce some of the best, the Fiesta and the Golf, two of the best everyday cars, affordable cars that we've grown up around, right? The bread and butter, but not necessarily premium, but just we know they're good, they're reliable, whatever. But the problem is when I think you're going out and shopping for your 40 grand EV, and you look at what the Chinese can offer you, and then you look at what Ford or Volkswagen can offer you, then at that point you're just going, oh, well, I'm getting so much more car and value for my money with the Chinese brand. I'm not, like the Ford badge doesn't mean enough, right? You're not going to spend.
I go back to the work that and the progress that brands like Kia have made in the last 5 years.
Yep.
And you look at the cars that they're making, or Hyundai.
Yeah.
And then whether you like it or not, MG.
Yeah.
And we managed to get over the MG 100 years of history thing at Festival of Speed without having to dig too much. Whether you agree or not that yes, they've been bought out by a Chinese company and they're leveraging the MG brand.
Yeah.
What they are doing is actually making EVs that are very good at what they do, and they aren't silly money.
We're talking MG4. Yep.
MG4 is a brilliant car, really good range.
Yep.
And it's not ridiculous money. It's sub 30k.
Yeah.
Which I know, look, 30 grand is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But compared with double that for the equivalent German brand, but the problem is that people are still tied to the brand of a Mercedes, a BMW, an Audi.
Yeah.
And I think actually that brand loyalty is slowly dissolving.
Yeah. It is. And I think as our wallets get sort of tightened and that all of that starts going out the window, you care less about the brand, more about the price of it. And that's just the reality to the majority of people out there. But I think you're right. You can't argue with that with MG. They are producing cars, electric cars, that are far more affordable than others. But I think the Koreans, Kia and Hyundai, those two, I know they're part of the same umbrella, aren't they?
Yeah.
Those two brands have done so well, but prior to this whole EV, I think they've just come up with all sorts of really cool models and everything. They're always very or more affordable than a lot of the equivalents out there. They always tend to be more practical. And I look at them. I used to do quite a lot with Hyundai back in my Fashion Week days. They sponsored us for many seasons, and it was almost like they listened to their customers. And the next model would be an improvement in many areas because someone might have wrote in and said, "Oh, well, the rear seat or the footwell is not," and they actually improve things. Whereas I think a lot of these bigger brands are too stubborn to to do that and listen to the ground level people. And
what I like about them is they generally have maybe 2 or 3 trim levels and a range of colours, and that's pretty much all you choose. You don't have this massive options list that can add 20 grand to a car. And then when you do buy it, you've then got a 7-year warranty.
Yes.
And you're like, and that's often a very good dealership experience.
Yep.
And that's the bit, that I think, the consumer's starting to appreciate more than the prestige of a particular brand.
Yep.
So yeah, I do worry, and it will be interesting to see what happens. What happens over the next? Well, I guess the other big thing with China is what happens if there's a change of presidency in the US. Because if our friend Mr. Trump gets in, then his approach to China is very different to the current administration. So that could throw a real spanner in the works. So I think the next 12 months in the car space is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, it is.
And probably scary, to be fair.
Yes, yeah. It will. I think this won't be the last time we talk about it.
No. So let's go back. The other thing we wanted to have a chat about, which is all part of the same conversation, and it's all kind of mainly to do with a lot of the Chinese brands at the Festival of Speed. But we wanted to just have a chat about how those brands work with journalists, influencers, content creators, however you want to say.
Yeah, well, I think this is a discussion that we need to have. I'm actually in the process of putting together a video for my own channel, which is going to be titled something like "How much did BMW pay me?"
How much did they pay you?
Oh, fuck! Surely couldn't disclose that right now.
£1 million.
Yeah, a month. And my reasoning for that is I do get accused a lot online and pointed at because. Yes, I do. There's no secret that I have a bit of a BMW bias. I love.
Really?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Wow.
I love it. I love BMWs.
I've been watching your stuff for years. I never realised.
Same with you and Minis.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think someone who gets paid an awful lot by BMW and says that their i5, which is their latest and greatest luxury electric car, is pretty much overpriced and not particularly good. Well, I mean, they paid me a lot to say that about that car.
How about
for
the car
instance.
you've turned up today?
And the X1 M35i that I've got out there that's awful, that we're going to talk about in a minute. They also paid me a lot of money to say that. But sorry, I've gone off tangent a little bit. But I think it's a weird space that we live in today and that you and I work in. We just talk quite a lot off camera before this podcast about it because... So Ped and I mostly work with press teams, and press hand you out a product or car, mostly in our case, to test and review as a non-biased person. But I think both of us will mostly choose products or cars that we're interested in. So we're hopefully already going to slightly like it. And therefore, most of our reviews are going to be fairly positive because we look at the car and go, I fancy that. Or my audience might like that. Let's grab it. But we'll both be very open and honest about everything. We're not going to sit there and absolutely destroy it and say it's a complete pile of... can I use the shit word?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, because that's not going to do our relationship any good with the brand, and also it's not constructive criticism. And I don't think we're in a place to say that, but we can give some honest feedback on whatever it is we're testing. Now, that's the press side of things.
Oh, and you missed the most important bit.
Sorry, yes.
How much did they pay you to do that?
0. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we get a press car,
Yep.
Or we go on a launch, like a first drive type thing.
Yep.
There's no payment there. Yes, the brand will deliver the car to you and insure the car.
Yep.
And it comes with a tank of fuel, and generally the kind of the normal understanding is you hand it back with at least a quarter of a tank.
Yep.
Left, so you get a bit of your fuel paid for free. And if you go on a launch, you might get a lunch. You might get flown to a country and a hotel, night in a hotel.
But even the flight things that you'll get, and I'm not going to name any manufacturers, but yes, you of course you'll get flown there. But then you end up driving to the airport, which in both of our cases, especially yours, is probably 60, 70 quid in fuel.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll pay for your airport parking. Most of the time, a lot of these manufacturers don't. That ends up being nearly 100 quid. So before you even get on this launch, you're a couple of £100 out of pocket. They don't cover all of those costs. Very few of them do. So that whole, you're 100% right. We get paid zero on that. And as content creators, we either have to make that up by the video doing exceptionally well, which at the moment is a very difficult thing to do unless you buy a 2011 Passat and drive it back from Africa, which costs a lot of money. Thankfully, Michelin, I mean, that's like almost a false economy in itself. It's like, yes, the video's done really well, but yes, it costs an absolute fortune to make that video. Thankfully, Michelin covered it. So you either make it up like that, or you then throw in a sponsored advert, which again, I think I've done a few, and they are something that's going to become more and more often, more and more common on my channel, because you get to a point where the YouTube revenue just continues to drop away, and you need to rely on an advertisement. But then you don't want to dissolve your channel by putting any old stuff on there. You want to be quite loyal with it. You want to be not loyal. You want to be organic with it. And so that's the other way you can make money back from this 3 or 4 day trip that you've just done with whoever it is. So that's the press side of it. Yep. So you're reviewing something and you're giving as honest feedback as possible.
I'll just add to that. So there's no, I've never had a video checked by a brand and told I can't put it out. I'm pretty, you got free reign to say what you want, negatives and positives.
Yeah.
I think in all the time I've been doing reviews, I've only once basically called the press team and said, I'm not going to do a video on this car because it's just not great.
Yep.
It was an early production run car. It was an EV. The range was shocking. It was very cold.
Yep.
And I just said, look, I'm not going to do you any favors or me. The car's clearly not right.
Yep.
Take it back, sort it out, and I'll have it when it's ready.
Yes.
And actually that kind of feedback, the brand involved were more grateful of that than me going onto the internet, going for a bit of viral, slagging the car off.
Yeah,
because that's not going to do anybody any favors.
No, you're 100%. And I've had
But I've never had a brand where I'm trying to think of one. The Lotus Emira. I gave that a really hard time.
Yep.
And I haven't had any conversation with Lotus, but and didn't have a problem with that because I was telling the truth.
Yeah. Well, and I think I've also had a similar thing where I've not put a video out, filmed one and just thought, this is not good. The car's not good. Spoke to the press team. But I think the flip side of that is, and I know some people say that it's simply not true, but it is, because we've been through it as well, is when you're starting out, and I think we actually had a conversation with Tim Williams maybe about the similar thing. When you're starting out and you suddenly, a brand contacts you and says, hey, do you want a car? Or you contact them and they're like, oh yeah, you can have that car. I don't care what anyone says. When you are starting out and you've got a tiny channel and a small audience, your confidence levels are low at that point, in the sense that you don't want to upset anyone. And so you do, I don't care what people say, you do feel obliged to give an overly positive review of that car or that product, especially when you're starting out, because you're worried that if you don't do that, they're not going to invite you back. They're not going to give you another car. So it is difficult because you have got to play the game when you start out, especially when you're against so many other bigger YouTubers and brands.
But that's the same for a print journalist.
It's just, 100%.
There's no difference at all.
No.
It's a really difficult one for people to understand the landscape we're in.
Yep.
Ultimately, our credibility that we've spent a lot of time building up, 8.5 years for me, longer for you, and the relationship we have with the press teams we work with is built on honesty.
Yep.
And our audiences tune in, hopefully, because they know that, I'll call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
If it's great, I'll say it's great. If it's not,
because that's what ultimately sells the product as well. That's why our audience go out and buy cars, because if you say something's really good, then they're like, well, it must be really good. He was very excited.
There's not that many bad cars out there anymore.
No.
If you went back 15 years ago,
apart from that one out there.
Yeah, cars were some really terrible cars.
Yeah.
But nowadays, most cars, they have more positives than negatives.
Oh, 100%.
So what about if you get paid then?
Yeah, so then there's the other side of this whole world, which is I guess I'd call it the marketing side. And a lot of these manufacturers have press teams, like BMW, for instance. They have a press team that I'm very close with, I love and always got on with. And then you've got the marketing team who are, I'm sure they communicate and stuff, and they tend to work in the same building, whatever. A lot of these marketing teams also have external, this is where a lot of it goes badly wrong in my opinion, but not just in the car industry, in a lot of industries, they have these external agencies, these expert marketing agencies that aren't necessarily expert, especially in whatever it is they're specializing in. So whether it's cars or whatever. So you've got that side of it, and the marketing side is the paid side. So they are the ones that are either paying you to turn up and say a brilliant thing about their car, but it's not necessarily always like that. You can. There's so many things I've wanted to do, for instance, with BMW over the years, where I've wanted some funding and some money to do a project that I'm passionate about, talk about a car or a model that I love and I know is going to be positive because I already know it's brilliant. So trying to just squeeze some money to fund a project. In fact, Patrick and I did the one paid thing I've done with BMW. Is something Patrick and I did, but the original, well, not the original, the 1 Series, as we know it today, it's just about to be replaced, the F40, I think they call it, M135i. And that was a car that I lived with for a while. I thought it was quite good. I had a strong history with that car. That's kind of when my channel started with the previous generation. And we went and shot a video up in Wales, and I can't remember what they paid us, but I do remember that Patrick and I walked away with about 200 quid in our pocket at the end of it, but it was more about, like, it was a showcasing thing. It was a video that I was very proud of. It was shot extremely well. So anyway, the marketing side of things, it to me, with a lot of manufacturers, it seems to be very disconnected, and they dive in and work with pretty much anyone that is willing to just sell themselves and put their soul on the line. And we saw that a lot at Goodwood. So much. I mean, and actually, I was contacted by 3 different, one manufacturer directly, but 2 other agencies that contacted me a long time before Goodwood and sort of pitched this amazing idea to me, but wouldn't give me the brand, wouldn't tell me what it was. And then I kept getting more and more information out of them. And then, had to sign this and sign that. And then eventually, oh, this is who it is. And I'm like, never heard of them. Like, you want me to go and stand, make a video at Goodwood on a stand. Obviously I can't say who it was. No way. If I was on the street now and, didn't have a roof over mine and Lou's head, then, maybe I'd consider it, but I'm not going to duck to that level and talk about a brand like it's the best thing in the world that I know nothing about, never even heard of him. And that's the danger we've got is too much of that going on, which is completely trickled down stuff. And I think where it becomes interesting for the likes of you and I, and our platform setup, is if we go back in time to when it was like mostly print media. So let's use the big, the Autocar, Auto Trader, Top Gear, Evo, all these big magazines and publications that we've known about for years, we've read for years. They've always made their money, as far as I can understand, off advertising from manufacturers and other brands in the magazine, especially, or online nowadays. You open any magazine, it's full of adverts. So they're making it.
Evo is like half adverts.
Yeah, it's exactly
magazine of adverts.
And they, but it kind of shows you they need that to survive today, to pay for their sexy shoots that you and I were car of the year. It's like, oh wow, that looks wicked. Well, they've had to fund that from all the advertising throughout the year, or whatever. So they've got money coming in from the marketing teams in one department, but then they are giving you a fairly honest review on a car out the other side. From the press department. But what we haven't got, for instance, is we're doing the press part of it, but we're not getting the advertising in from, do you know what I mean? We don't have those advertising pages. We're not reviewing a a Maserati and then getting Maserati's marketing team to pay for adverts on the channel. It doesn't work like that. We're just doing the hard graft job and the press side of it, giving honest feedback, but we're not actually making money anywhere else. And I think that's where it becomes quite difficult for the likes of you and I. We can't just sit back and say, oh, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to advertise anything. I can't put that in my video. I want it to be very... we've got to start doing more and more. And I think, it's going to be an interesting landscape. But there's a lot of really watered down stuff, which I look at, especially during Goodwood this year. It's just like, oh, my God, I can't believe that. And some of the people that are doing it as well, you're like, there's zero connection between you and that brand. Zero. But nobody cares because they just have to feedback numbers.
It's worth saying, because someone's listening to this or watching this, about to say, well, hold on a minute. You're getting revenue from YouTube ads or Facebook ads or whatever.
Yep.
And we are, absolutely. And, we don't really have the control about who's advertising on the channel. But yeah, for sure we do. That's directly related to the views and who's watching them and where they're coming from and so on. But the kind of videos we do aren't in the same league in terms of view count as the likes of the really big guys that are smashing it, like your Matt Armstrongs, those types that can get 3 or 4 million views on a video. So you kind of do need to balance the income from somewhere, and it's a really tricky balancing act because you want to maintain your integrity, but also half of me, I'm the same as you. I finished up Goodwood. I didn't do a single paid job at Goodwood.
Yep.
I had some amazing experiences. Please don't get me wrong, and I'm not complaining. I got offered the opportunity to make some great content, and that gave me content to share with my channel.
Yeah.
But I finished Goodwood and went, you're a fool, Pete, because look at the people that are doing these paid jobs. Like you said, absolutely no history with a brand at all, and then they're standing, oh, this is the best thing ever. And their bank manager's happy, basically.
Yeah, it is hard.
I don't want it to come across like sour grapes.
No,
because it's not. Hats off to the guys that are doing it. We're naming no names.
Yeah,
because that's uncool and unprofessional.
Yeah, and I wish I had their bank accounts.
Yeah, but I could reel off half a dozen people. That we're talking about. But it's just that for me, it muddies the water of the job that the rest of us are doing.
Yeah, well, even I wasn't gonna mention it, but I am gonna mention it. I think even BMW, we were on their stand, we did the podcast, and it was wicked. And I know all of us felt so grateful to be on there and do what we did. And again, a lot of that stemmed from some of the press team and the team on the floor who were just brilliant. But again, after Goodwood had settled, I discovered and found out and looked in socials, and there were so many people there getting paid by BMW to be there, like either I don't know, BMW UK, BMW Germany, and various other agencies and whatever. And I walk around, I think because I'm so involved and integrated with that brand, in many ways, and I love it so much. And I spent most of the 2 days there talking on the stand, talking to people about their cars, their journeys, whatever. So, and then I leave and I just think, wow, I'm one of very few people that were there with any kind of audience, especially a very focused BMW audience, who wasn't earning a penny to be there, because I'm very grateful again to be invited by BMW and spend the night with them on Wednesday night and all the rest of it. It was great. But again, it's just like you sit there and you just think, that was great, but why am I the mug that's not earning? No, but it's true, isn't it? Why am I a mug? Why am I the one that's here, that's talking to all these people? I brought an M3 because of you. I brought an M2, and I am blowing my own trumpet, but it just was relentless for 2 days. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I've earned zero for this. I'm here because I love the brand and I think what annoys me most is, and I've still got people pointing at me going, yeah, but you're getting paid by, I'm not getting paid by BMW.
And I think that's the reason we're doing this in I want to talk about the podcast. It's not sour grapes. It's to try and make people realize that, that we aren't under the paymaster of somebody and so on.
And talking of that, I think we should finish with talking about the cars that we're in. This would almost prove the point. Well, I turned up today and I was like, oh, Ped, we're in essentially the same car.
And I hadn't actually realised it's the same. So I'm currently running the new Mini Countryman JCW as a long-termer for Mini UK. I've got it for about 6 months. And I have to say, I'm loving it. It's a great car. I really enjoyed it at the launch that I went to, or the first press drives earlier this year. And then the guys at Mini said, look, would you like to live with one? Because it's that time you spend in a car, you just learn so much, right?
Yep.
All the little things.
Things that might annoy you to start with actually don't annoy you after a while, and vice versa sometimes.
Yeah, to one of the ones that I'd never spotted on the launch, but it's now really winding me up. So the seats are really cool, but the headrest tilts right in at the back of your head.
Okay.
Right? So when you're driving along, your head's constantly just touching the headrest. So you have to go, and it's not a movable one either, it's fixed.
Okay.
Yeah, and I never would have picked that up
Yeah.
at the launch.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm in that, and you've rocked up in...
I've got an X1 M35i, which is, as far as my understanding, is exactly the same car underneath the skin.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very similar footprints, same engine, same running gear.
And it's funny, we described two of the characteristics this morning. I went, oh man, yeah, the Mini drives like this. And you went, so does the BMW.
Yeah. They are literally...
Very, lots of torque steer, lots of front end movement when you're on, especially when you're on the throttle.
I'd say the bigger, and of course, Ped's going to have plenty of content on that car on his channel, and I'm going to have a review of the X1 coming very soon. But I think, the two negatives in the X1 M35i is, the torque steer, which is just horrendous. I mean, it doesn't feel anything like an X-Drive platform. It just feels front-wheel drive. And we know that's what it is fundamentally underneath, but it just feels... and the gearbox, which for me is the biggest disappointment, because the predecessor of that and the M135i that's just about to go out, outgoing M135i, had the ICE and 8-speed gearbox in it, which I don't know, Mini used the same thing, but it was okay, but it wasn't great. It wasn't as good as a ZF. So when I read that it had a 7-speed dual clutch, I was like, oh, yes. And the upshifts are amazing. And bang, bang. The downshifts are just like... a bit like that Lotus.
Not got a Lotus Emira gearbox in it, is it?
I don't know. Maybe it's got 2 clutches on the way up and none on the way down, because it's not the best. It's not BMW's finest hour, that one. But I remember when we did a dual test years ago, and I had the M135i, in fact the one that Pat and I were filming.
Yeah.
And you had
the Clubman JCW,
which you ended up buying one of.
Yeah.
But I remember that test very clearly, because they were very almost identical packages. But I much preferred the Mini. It was far more exciting and fun compared to the. So it's a shame we missed the trick. We both got here today. We're like, we should have filmed the twin test.
But the thing with the Mini being torque steery and front endy is, I said on my, I've filmed some stuff on the way in today for my kind of. I think we've done a couple of thousand miles on it so far. That's fine, because that's like a Mini characteristic. And they say, I said that car drives like a Mini.
Yep.
It might be the same sort of size as an Audi SQ7. It's massive. And I only say that because I parked it. I went to a friend's house about a month ago, and I parked it next to his SQ7.
Yeah.
And he came out and went, is that a Mini? It's like the same size as my Audi. I went, it's a big car. But it does drive like a Mini. And that's because it's got a very kind of torque steery, kind of almost tram lines a little bit, bit like the GP3 did, but not quite as bad, because that car was horrendous.
Yeah.
But it's funny. But we should have done a back-to-back review.
GP3 has got to be one of the, that thing's just...
Well, that's actually, there's a good example going back to the conversation we just had.
Yeah.
Bear in mind, I ordered one of those and nearly bought one.
Thank God you did.
And it was only the fact that I had a Clubman JCW long-termer for 3 months.
Yep.
I cancelled my GP3 and bought one because we fell in love with it so much.
Yeah.
And I purposely didn't have a GP3 press car for ages, because I was really worried I'd get one and think, oh, wow, I made the biggest mistake ever, cancelling my order.
Yep.
And then I got it, and it nearly killed me within the first half an hour. I just thought that it was such a disappointment.
Yeah.
Until I drove Imran's one.
Yes.
Because the guys at Evolve really sorted it out. They did.
Even then, I remember Imran saying, I'm getting rid of it. It's just like, we've made it so much better. But just not a car I'm in love with. And I think cars like the Geo Yaris also really, the timing of the GP3 were just like, how many? I've never seen one on a track day, never see them on the road. I mean, maybe collectors are putting them away, but they're not worth. I don't understand. But
Geo Yaris.
Yeah, I'd have a Geo Yaris as well. But I think, looking out there, your Mini, whatever it is, it's dwarfing Patrick's Passat estate. I mean, it literally, look at it. It looks.
You might actually see on that camera, don't you? Yeah.
It's bigger than Patrick's Passat
It does look
estate.
quite cool, though.
It does look very cool.
Yeah.
Well, no, not very cool. I'll take that back. Looks okay. It looks okay.
Oh no, Pat was just taking a picture of that Spartan S3 right in front of him.
Nice. Red. What red's that? On Louis. Oh, it's on Michelin's. I know you can park. It's on Michelin's.
Is he?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
PS4S's.
It's just part there, mate. It's fine.
Yeah, nice.
Just block our light.
Well, we're approaching an hour, mate. But I think before we sort of sign off, you mentioned it earlier on briefly. Myra.
Yeah, Myra. I don't know which one round it is. But yeah. So yeah, I've got to ask you a question, right?
Okay.
So we did some tyre testing.
Yep.
Okay. And
wait, are you Jonathan Benson?
well, I now have a bigger respect. I always respect Jonathan Benson anyway because he's like Mr. Tyre Tester. But it was a day organised by Michelin. We're at Myra, and we did 4 different activities. But there's 2 I want to talk about. The first one, which is fairly obvious for a car guy, but they were talking about underinflated tyres.
Yep.
So we had 2 Golfs, VW Golfs, one running Michelin tyres at the correct tyre pressure, and then one running them at 15 psi under the correct tyre pressure.
Okay.
Because they'd done some research. They went to CarFest last year, which I said, well, you want to go to an event that's actually attended by car people.
Yep.
Not CarFest.
Yeah.
But they found 40% of the cars that they checked were underinflated tyres.
Doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did a rolling resistance test where we drove into a set of cones at 10 miles an hour, depressed the clutch, went into neutral, and just coasted until the car stopped.
Yep.
The difference between the underinflated and the inflated tyres was just unbelievable.
Wow.
Like 20 metres, basically.
And that's
25
efficiency,
meters.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's efficiency. And so that was amazing. But the one that freaked me out was the question. So I think most people would have heard of, if you're going to change tyres, you really want to change them in pairs.
Yep.
Right?
Front axle, rear axle.
Yeah. So if you were your front wheel drive car,
Yep.
and you're putting some new tyres on the car, a new
Yes.
pair of tyres, which axle would you put them on?
Oh, I know the answer to this, and it doesn't make sense to me. You'd put them on the rear axle, the new tyres on the rear.
That is the correct answer.
Yeah, but it doesn't make any sense to me.
But if you went down the pub and you asked 10 mates, most people would say front axle.
I said that when I was asked initially. Yeah.
Right. So I did the same. So we then went out on a low grip handling, like a big donut. Went round and round and round. So the first one we went out of, there was new tyres on the front axle, worn tyres on the rear axle.
Yeah.
You turn in and you get really, really nice turn in, and then suddenly, bang, oversteer.
Right.
Or you lift off, bang, lift off, oversteer, and you lose the back end of the car.
Right.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
And then we went out in a car with new tyres on the rear axle, used tyres on the front axle, and all that happens is the faster you go, you just push into understeer.
Yep.
And you get hardly any lift off oversteer at all.
Yep.
And it was just the best demonstration ever.
It's a much safer
And
handling.
even they were saying even big. I'm gonna use someone like a Quick Fit, but there are still big tire fitting companies out there whose recommended advice is to put new tires on the front axle of a front wheel drive car.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, don't do that.
Yeah.
Put it on the rear.
But I suppose
And there's a video coming to my channel soon.
I guess there is the difficulty with that is a front wheel drive car chews through its front tires 3 times quicker than its rears, right?
Yeah.
So I guess the in an ideal world, I'm sure what you're saying, what Michelin said is correct. But the reality is, if you've got a half-worn or 3/4 worn front set of tires, and you know they only last you 6 months, then you're automatically going to want to put new ones on the front, aren't you?
You are.
But then I suppose if you've got a square setup, you can quite easily swap them
You can
around.
swap them around, but the challenge is, I mean, we were in an environment that dramatically
Enhanced
the oversteer that you got.
Yeah.
The challenge is though, if that happens in the real world on a B road, that's probably going to happen at like 50 or 60 miles an hour in the wet. And if that happens going around a right hand bend you're going to end up in a ditch.
Yeah, or a tree.
So that was, and then the other one, the last one, and they called it the hire car scenario or the lease car, where they only changed one tyre.
Ooh.
Right, so we had one tyre on the car that was new, 3 worn.
Yeah.
And that was terrifying because depending on whether you're going round a right-hand bend or a left-hand bend,
yes,
it was just so unpredictable. And when it did go, it went horribly.
Right.
So, yeah, it was it's one of those things and it was a really interesting day. And one of the things I love about working with Michelin, going back to what we were saying before about people working with brands that doesn't resonate with them at all.
Yep.
I genuinely find the stuff that Michelin do interesting and really eye-opening, and that it was a really good day, really, really interesting day. And then we finished up doing some off-roading with BF Goodrich tyres on.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Awesome.
But I noticed on your socials, mate, I want to say well done. You got a lovely new bike. You finally got your gear on and went for a bike ride.
Oh, mate. I mean, you can relate to this because you're a proper cyclist. I had a big accident almost exactly 4 years ago. When I was really getting back into riding. I've been riding in my mountain bike for a couple of years, was feeling great, loved it. It was a great way to let stress out. And then all of a sudden I had this horrible accident and came from nowhere, don't know what happened. And it really shook me up. And it put me off my bike completely. I sold my bike and hadn't ridden a bike for 4 years. I had bought a couple of new mountain bikes in that time off my friend at Saracen. But they just sat in the garage. I think you saw my old one.
I quite fancied having it myself, to be honest. It was really nice.
It was just sitting there. Michelin sent me out some tyres for it. They were on it. It was just sitting there. Hadn't done one pedal stroke because I thought as soon as I use it, it's used and then its value's gone. Anyway, I picked up a new one this year. I traded my old one in, got a new one. And it's been sitting there for a couple of months. And the other day I said to my mate, Andy, who works at Saracen, we're going riding. And we went riding. He hadn't ridden for years either. But we just had the best time. It was beautiful, like today, and I got to experiment with the Michelin tyres for the first time. Actually, it's the first time I've ridden Michelin mountain bike tyres since I used to race with Michelin tyres back in the late 90s. Is when I used to actually run them on my downer bike. So what's that? 25 years. And Wild Enduros, they're called.
Tubeless.
They are tubeless ready. But I ran. Because I'm still quite old school. I ran tubes in them, but I'm going to experiment with tubeless and stuff. But they're brilliant. I can't say that I tested them hard because...
Oh, mate, no, hold on a minute. You were doing you got loads more air than I ever get when I'm on my bike. I've seen your socials.
I felt very, very rusty. I felt like, the saying, what is it? You never forget how to ride a bike. Didn't forget how to ride a bike, but I just felt, it was such a bizarre feeling. I felt so... like alien, everything felt alien, but the tires were great, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on this podcast. They're really the breakaway on them. I mean, tire technology has come so far in that 25 years on bikes as well, obviously. In fact, we've got a motocross tire in front of us there, but the breakaway was just lovely. So a bit like a Cup 2 on track. When you run out of grip, it doesn't just snap and you don't suddenly have no grip. You feel it go. And you go from 100% to 90% so you can control things. And very similar to these Wild Enduro tyres in the dry dirt. Yes, I said that dry in the UK. When they gave and you lost that grip, you could feel it going and it didn't just suddenly throw you over the bars like I'm so good at. It's great. But we need to both get out on mountain bikes and do that.
While I was driving that BF Goodrich tyre at Myra, I didn't even know this was a thing. The all-terrain BF Goodrich, I think the same with the mud terrain, they are self-cleaning grooves.
Yes. That's what they got all the little dimples and stuff.
Yeah, he goes, so they're self-cleaning grooves. Yeah. I'm sorry, what? So if a stone goes in the groove, as the tyre's going around, because they're a certain shape, the stone's slowly forced down the groove until it pops out.
Yep. It's amazing, isn't it? Because I suppose if you went on loads of stones and suddenly they filled all the gaps, then that tyre would become useless in a way, wouldn't it?
I was like, wow. Yeah. That was the same as when Jonathan Benson told me that snow tyres give you grip by gathering snow on the tyre, and then the grip comes from snow on snow.
Yes.
And I'm like, no, you're winding me up. That's not true.
Well, it's like a snowball, isn't it? You roll a snowball and it becomes bigger and bigger because it's quite sticky. But anyway, before we wrap up, I've just actually remembered I need to mention the Passat. Because it's about to be auctioned off at the Piston Heads auction. I'm going to grab my phone and give you a date because I think this is the date it's going to be going. So it's a MotoGP dates that we're actually going to.
Yeah.
So I think it's either going to be the 3rd or the 4th of August. Keep an eye out for it if you're interested. What can I talk about it now? I can talk about it now, can't I? So the Passat is currently down at Topaz Detailing.
It's got to be the cheapest car they've ever had.
Mate, I dropped it down there to Thomas Howarth on Saturday, a few days ago. And it was comical seeing the car. Most of the stuff I couldn't even take pictures of because obviously they're all very private stuff in there. But I mean, we've got a Valkyrie here. There was a lot of that level of car surrounding. Yeah. But obviously the Passat, they've never had such an amazing, unique car down there. But Topaz are doing a full detail restoration sort of thing on the outside and on the inside, the interior, including repairing the leather seat, all the rest of it. The car, we know it's been serviced and everything's been replaced because Pat and I proved how well it ran, but it's now going to look like $1 million as well. So, and this is all in the name of charity. Michelin bought the car off me, and we are auctioning the car off. Piston Heads are doing the auction for free. Topaz are obviously doing all that. All these things coming together, and we're auctioning the car off, and all proceeds will go towards the Mine charity.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Which is obviously very close to my heart, and something we've talked about lots on the podcast. So it's awesome. It's such a great ending to that car.
Aren't you tempted to bid for it yourself?
I am, mate. I am definitely bidding. I've got a figure in my head, and I am definitely bidding. But I really hope it goes well above the figure that I've got in my head. Because, Lou, if you're listening to this, I'm not really bidding. Obviously, she's like, we don't have any space for the cars we've already got. No. Anyway, I'll store it at yours, mate, because your garage must be coming on. But we are going well over now, I think we should wrap it.
Cool.
Thanks as always to everyone for listening or watching. Make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, subscribe. Follow our Facebook page, Instagram, all the rest of that. Looking forward to the next episode. Yeah. Great to see you.
In fact, our guest for the next episode just arrived.
He's just walked in. He's looking really cool. He looks like Tom Cruise coming to this plane.
He does, mate. He does. Anyway, we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.